What if you could taste history, not just read about it or see it in a museum, but actually experience the flavors that once delighted kings, nourished warriors, and defined entire civilizations? Picture this: a single bite transporting you back 2,000 years to a Roman banquet, where honey-glazed dormice were considered a delicacy, or to the courts of ancient China, where fermented fish sauce was as precious as gold. These aren't just recipes, they're time capsules, whispering secrets about how people lived, loved, and celebrated. And today, thanks to a thrilling blend of archaeology, chemistry, and sheer curiosity, we're unlocking these culinary treasures one dish at a time. Think about the last meal you truly savored. Now imagine that dish vanishing from memory, its ingredients and techniques fading into obscurity. That's the fate of countless recipes from empires like Byzantium, Mesopotamia, and the Inca until now. Food historians and scientists are piecing together clues from clay tablets, carbonized remains, and even the teeth of long-gone rulers to recreate these lost flavors. It's detective work for the senses, and the discoveries are astonishing. Take garum, the Roman Empire's ubiquitous fish sauce, which required months of fermentation under the Mediterranean sun. Or the millet beers of ancient Egypt, brewed in temples as offerings to the gods. These weren't just meals, they were cultural cornerstones tied to rituals, trade routes, and even politics. So why does this matter to us today? Because food is the most intimate artifact of all. A crumbling statue can tell us how a pharaoh wanted to be seen, but a loaf of bread buried in Pompeii's ashes reveals how ordinary people lived, what they cherished, what they craved. By resurrecting these dishes, we're not just satisfying curiosity, we're rebuilding connections to our shared human story. And the best part, some of these ancient recipes are shockingly relevant, from probiotic-rich fermented foods to sustainable cooking techniques that modern chefs are now embracing. So grab a seat at history's table, because this journey through time is about to change how you think about every meal you've ever eaten. Archaeology is like a time traveler's toolkit for the kitchen, digging up more than just ruins, but the very ingredients of daily life. Take those Egyptian tombs, for instance. When scientists scraped residue from 4,000-year-old cooking pots, they didn't just find traces of garlic and thyme. They uncovered entire spice blends that would rival modern gourmet stores. And it's not just about what they ate, but how they ate it. In the ruins of Pompeii, carbonized loaves of bread preserved by volcanic ash revealed intricate baking techniques, with scored tops to portion servings, proof that convenience food isn't just a modern obsession. Then there's the detective work happening in dental calculus, yes, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth. By analyzing microscopic food particles trapped there, researchers have identified everything from millet grains in Neolithic farmers to traces of blue cheese in Iron Age Europe. Imagine biting into a wheel of cheese so pungent, it left a mark on history, literally. These findings shatter the myth that ancient diets were bland or monotonous. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets detail recipes for meat stews with beer and vinegar, while Inca storage pits still hold freeze-dried potatoes, a testament to their ingenious preservation methods. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Some of these ancient techniques are making a comeback. Fermentation, once used to preserve fish in Roman garum, is now hailed as a superfood trend. The Inca's freeze-drying method, it's the same science behind your instant coffee. Archaeology doesn't just reconnect us with the past, it inspires the future of food. So the next time you sprinkle herbs or reach for a fermented snack, remember, you're part of a chain that stretches back millennia, one delicious discovery at a time. Ancient Mesopotamia holds a secret in its cracked clay tablets, one that might make modern beer enthusiasts raise an eyebrow. These 4,000-year-old recipes, carefully pressed into wet clay by scribes, weren't just grocery lists, they were meticulous brewing instructions. Barley, dates, honey, and a mysterious ingredient called bapir, likely a fermented bread cake, formed the backbone of a beverage so vital. Workers along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were sometimes paid in beer rations. Imagine receiving your paycheck in pints, proof that this wasn't just a drink, but liquid gold woven into the fabric of daily life. What's astonishing isn't just that they brewed beer, but how advanced their methods were. Archaeologists recreating these ancient recipes discovered a two-step fermentation process. First, malting barley to release sugars, then adding date syrup and honey for extra sweetness. The result, a cloudy, unfiltered brew, sipped through straws to avoid floating sediment, with a flavor profile closer to a fruity mead than today's lagers. And here's the twist, these brews were often flavored with herbs like thyme or juniper, a precursor to the hoppy IPAs we love now. But Mesopotamian beer's legacy goes beyond taste. It was a social glue shared in temples during rituals to honor Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing, and poured as offerings to the gods. Even medical texts prescribed beer for ailments, blending nourishment with spirituality. Fast forward to modern craft breweries experimenting with ancient grains and wild fermentation. Suddenly, those clay tablets don't seem so distant. Every time someone savors an artisanal sour or a honey-infused ale, they're sipping from a tradition that began in the world's first cities, where beer wasn't just made but worshipped. If you think today's global spice trade is impressive, the Romans would have put it to shame. Their insatiable appetite for pepper, saffron, and a mysterious herb called silphium didn't just flavor their food, it reshaped the ancient world. Picture this, ships crammed with peppercorns sailing from India to Alexandria, then transported across the Mediterranean to Rome, where a single pound of pepper could cost a soldier's monthly wages. But it wasn't just about luxury, spices were power. Emperors flaunted their wealth by showering guests with dishes dusted in gold leaf and exotic seasonings, while silphium, a plant so coveted it was stamped onto Roman coins, became a symbol of status until it was loved to extinction. What's fascinating isn't just the extravagance, but how these flavors reveal Rome's culinary genius. Take garum, the empire's ubiquitous fish sauce. Modern chefs recreating it describe a liquid so potent, a few drops could transform a dish into something electrifying umami centuries before the word existed. Archaeologists have found garum factories from Spain to Tunisia, where thousands of fish fermented for months under the sun, proving this wasn't a niche condiment but the ketchup of the ancient world. And here's the twist. Rome's taste for bold, fermented flavors echoes in today's Mediterranean pantry, from Italian colatura di alisai to Vietnamese nuoc mam, tracing a thread across time and continents. Yet some ingredients, like silphium, slipped through history's cracks. Ancient texts rave about its medicinal properties and unique taste, part garlic, part celery, but overharvesting and climate shifts wiped it out by the 1st century. Botanists still debate its closest living relative, while chefs experiment with substitutes, hoping to capture a ghost of its flavor. Rome's spice obsession teaches us a sobering lesson. Even the mightiest empires can't outrun scarcity. But it also shows how food bridges eras. Every time you reach for black pepper or savor a dish layered with umami, you're tasting a legacy that once fueled an empire's rise and still lingers on our plates today. In the shadow of the pyramids, bread wasn't just sustenance, it was sacred. The ancient Egyptians didn't merely bake, they elevated grain into an art form, crafting over 40 distinct varieties of bread, each with its own purpose and symbolism. Picture a baker in Thebes kneading dough made from emmer wheat, a hardy grain now nearly forgotten, its nutty richness filling the air as loaves baked in clay ovens. These weren't just meals, they were offerings to the gods, provisions for the afterlife, and even wages for laborers who built the monuments we marvel at today. What's extraordinary is how much we've learned from loaves left behind. In tombs, archaeologists have found bread so well preserved, you can still see the baker's fingerprints pressed into the crust. These time capsule loaves reveal ingredients like dates, honey, and even beer. Yes, beer worked into the dough for flavor and texture. Modern bakers recreating these recipes describe a dense, chewy crumb, a far cry from today's airy baguettes, but bursting with a toasted, almost earthy depth. That unique taste came from emmer wheat, a grain so central to Egyptian life that its harvest was celebrated in festivals, and its failure could mean famine. But bread's role went beyond the plate. It was a bridge between worlds. Tomb paintings show loaves piled high as offerings to Osiris, the god of the afterlife, while hieroglyphs depict pharaohs presenting bread to deities as a symbol of prosperity. Even the act of baking mirrored creation myths. Kneading dough echoed the god Autumn shaping the universe from chaos. And when ordinary Egyptians were buried, they were often laid to rest with tiny clay models of bakeries, ensuring they'd never hunger in the next life. Here's the twist: Egypt's bread legacy isn't just history. Emmer wheat, once thought lost to time, is making a comeback among farmers and artisanal bakers, praised for its resilience and rich flavor. Every time someone savors a slice of whole grain sourdough, they're tasting a thread that connects them to a civilization that understood bread wasn't just food. It was the very stuff of life, divinity, and human connection. The Silk Road wasn't just a shimmering ribbon of fabric winding across deserts and mountains. It was a bustling, aromatic highway where flavors traveled faster than merchants. Imagine a caravan stopping in Samarkand, unloading sacks of Chinese cinnamon beside Persian saffron, while cooks traded secrets over bubbling pots of pilaf. This wasn't just commerce, it was the world's first fusion food movement, where noodles born in China's wheat fields met the meat-stuffed dumplings of Central Asia, creating a culinary dialogue that still echoes in our bowls today. Take pasta, for instance. Archaeologists scraping the inside of 4,000-year-old Chinese pots found strands of millet noodles, preserved like edible time capsules. But here's the twist: by the time Marco Polo arrived in China, the Silk Road had already spun a web of noodle variations. From hand-pulled lamian in the east to lagman in Central Asia, each a delicious adaptation shaped by local grains and tastes. And it wasn't just about ingredients, techniques traveled too. The Persian art of steaming rice with meats and spices evolved into pilaf, a dish so versatile it morphed into biryani in India and paella in Spain, proving that recipes are the original open source code. But the Silk Road's real magic was in its small surprises. Ever bite into an apricot? Thank those ancient trade routes for carrying its seeds from China to the Mediterranean, where Romans dubbed it the Armenian apple. Or consider sugar, first pressed from cane in India, then crystallized by Persian chemists before sweetening desserts from Venice to Beijing. Even something as simple as a cup of tea tells a story. Tibetan traders compressed tea leaves into bricks to survive mountain crossings, while Turkic nomads whisked it with salt and butter for stamina against the cold. What's astonishing isn't just the distance these flavors covered, but how they transformed cultures. When saffron from Greece dyed Persian rice golden, it wasn't just a spice, it became a symbol of hospitality. When Chinese ginger spiced up Roman feasts, it turned medicine into luxury. And when Arab traders introduced citrus to Europe, they didn't just bring fruit, they brought sunshine in winter, revolutionizing how people ate. The Silk Road reminds us that no cuisine evolves in isolation. Every time you twirl spaghetti or savor a spiced stew, you're tasting the legacy of 1,000 shared meals, proof that the best recipes, like stories, are meant to be passed on. High in the thin air of the Andes, where frost clings to the mountains even in daylight, the Inca turned a survival challenge into a culinary revolution. Picture this: farmers spreading freshly harvested potatoes across the rocky slopes at night, letting the freezing temperatures work their magic. By morning, the potatoes would freeze solid. Then came the real genius: the relentless Andean sun would thaw them, drawing out moisture as villagers stomped on them repeatedly, turning each tuber into something entirely new. The result, chuño, a freeze-dried potato that could last for years without spoiling, weighing almost nothing, yet packed with enough energy to fuel an empire. This wasn't just clever food preservation, it was engineering on a grand scale. The Inca built storehouses called cas high in the mountains, where chuño could be stockpiled by the ton, ready to feed armies, sustain cities during droughts, or trade across vast distances. Modern tests on ancient chuño samples reveal just how effective this method was. The removal of nearly all moisture prevented bacterial growth, while the freeze-thaw cycle broke down toxins in wild potato varieties, making them safe to eat. Imagine a civilization thriving at altitudes where crops struggle to grow, all thanks to a technique so simple yet so brilliant, it feels like alchemy. But here's what's truly astonishing. Today's food scientists are taking notes. In an era of climate uncertainty and supply chain fragility, chuño's lessons are more relevant than ever. NASA has studied freeze drying for space travel, while startups are experimenting with traditional methods to create shelf-stable foods without electricity or artificial preservatives. The Inca didn't just solve their own problem, they left behind a blueprint for sustainable resilience, and the echoes of chuño go deeper than practicality. In Andean communities, the annual chuño-making ritual, called tiyikti, is still a celebration where families gather under the stars to transform hardship into abundance. Every stomp on those frozen potatoes is a reminder that innovation isn't always about high-tech solutions. Sometimes it's about listening to the land and the wisdom of those who came before us. So the next time you reach for a bag of instant coffee or astronaut ice cream, remember, you're tasting an idea that once sustained a mountain empire, proving that the past might just hold the ingredients for our future. In ancient Athens, the clinking of wine cups signaled more than just the start of dinner. It marked the opening of a space where flavors and ideas collided with equal intensity. The Greek Symposium wasn't merely a meal. It was a carefully choreographed dance of food, drink, and discourse, where philosophers debated morality between bites of honey-glazed figs, and politicians forged alliances over bowls of lentil stew. Picture a room lit by flickering oil lamps, guests reclining on couches as servants circulated with platters of stuffed vine leaves, their tender parcels bursting with seasoned rice and pine nuts, a dish so beloved its modern descendant, dolmades, still graces Greek tables today. What set these gatherings apart wasn't just the menu, but the ritual. Wine, diluted with seawater or spring water to symbolize balance, flowed alongside poetry recitals and riddles. A master of ceremonies, the symposiarch, ensured no one drank too much or too little, embodying the Greek ideal of moderation. Recent recreations of these feasts reveal surprising details. The wine likely carried resinous notes from pine-sealed amphorae, while desserts like tigonites, fried dough drizzled with thyme honey, offered a sweet counterpoint to heated debates about justice or the nature of love. But the Symposium's true brilliance lay in its fusion of sustenance and intellect. Philosophers like Plato used food metaphors to explain ethics, comparing a well-ordered soul to a harmonious meal. Even the arrangement of dishes followed philosophical principles. Bitter olives served first to cleanse the palate mirrored the Socratic method of dismantling assumptions before seeking truth. Archaeologists analyzing pottery shards from Symposium sites found traces of oregano and cumin, evidence that seasoning wasn't just about taste, but about stimulating the mind. The Greeks believed bold flavors sparked bold ideas. Hospitality, or xenia, was sacred. A stranger at the door might be served kykeon, a barley porridge with grated cheese, as an offering of trust. This ethos extended to politics. Diplomatic disputes were often resolved over shared meals, with the act of breaking bread, or in this case, flatbread, serving as a social contract. Modern chefs recreating these recipes note how the simplicity of ingredients, olive oil, grains, wild herbs, belied their symbolic weight. A sprinkle of sea salt wasn't just seasoning, it connected diners to the Aegean itself. The Symposium's legacy endures in ways we might not expect. That tradition of lingering over shared plates while discussing life's big questions. It's the ancestor of today's dinner party culture. The Greek insistence on balancing rich and light, sweet and savory, mirrors contemporary nutrition science. And when you see a TED Talk audience sipping wine at a post-lecture reception, you're witnessing a 2,000-year-old habit of pairing nourishment for the body with nourishment for the mind. The Greeks understood something we're still learning. The best meals aren't just eaten, they're experienced, debated, and remembered long after the last crumb is gone. Buried beneath the soil of ancient Chinese tombs, sealed in lacquerware jars that have survived 2,000 years, lies evidence of a culinary revolution, one that shaped the very essence of East Asian flavors. The Han Dynasty didn't just cook food, they orchestrated it with sauces so complex they could make a modern chef's palate tremble with recognition. Imagine unearthing a pottery vessel and catching the faintest whiff of a fermented soybean paste, its aroma still pungent after centuries, or deciphering bamboo slips that detail recipes for meat-based condiments thickened with roasted grains and spiked with mountain herbs. These weren't mere accompaniments, they were the soul of Han cuisine, transforming humble ingredients into lavish feasts fit for emperors. What's staggering is how familiar some of these flavors feel today. Take jeong, the ancestor of modern soy sauce and miso. Han cooks fermented soybeans with grains in earthenware jars, harnessing molds like Aspergillus oryzae, the same microbe used in Japan's sake and koji today. But they didn't stop there. Excavated texts describe sauces blending fermented fish with roasted millet, or minced pheasant slow-cooked with wild ginger and Sichuan peppercorns, creating layers of umami that predate the term by millennia. Recreations of these recipes reveal a sophistication that rivals contemporary gourmet pantries, smoky, salty, and deeply savory, with a lingering heat that dances on the tongue. Yet some sauces vanished into history's shadows, victims of shifting palates or lost ingredients. Roux jai, a luxurious meat-based paste mentioned in Han banquet records, required rare venison and an aromatic shrub called zhu that botanists still struggle to identify. Others fell from favor as Buddhist vegetarianism spread, replacing meat-heavy condiments with plant-based alternatives, but their legacy lingers in unexpected places. Korea's doenjang and Thailand's pla raw fermented bean and fish pastes echo Han techniques, proving that flavor memories outlast empires, the real tragedy. We'll never taste some of these masterpieces, A sauce called lye, praised in poetry for its ability to make the dullest vegetable sing, disappeared when its key ingredient, a type of mountain yeast, was lost to deforestation. But here's the beautiful twist. Modern food scientists, armed with Han-era texts and residue analysis, are piecing together approximations, blending archaeology with gastronomy. Every time someone dips a dumpling in soy sauce or savors a spoonful of miso soup, they're tasting a thread that connects them to a dynasty that understood the alchemy of fermentation and the power of a sauce to defy time itself. The frothy, rust-colored liquid in the Aztec emperor's golden cup held a power far beyond mere refreshment. It was the blood of gods, a currency of diplomacy, and a bridge between worlds. This wasn't the chocolate we know today, made from crushed cacao beans whipped with water until it foamed, then spiced with chili, vanilla, and the vivid orange petals of the fragrant flor de cacao. This sacred brew was so revered, it was served in rituals where a single sip could seal alliances or commune with the divine. Archaeologists examining residue from Olmec vessels dating back 3,000 years found traces of theobromine, proving this obsession with chocolate began long before the Aztecs, making it one of the few flavors to survive the collapse of multiple civilizations. What's astonishing isn't just its endurance, but how radically its meaning transformed. For the Aztecs, cacao beans were literal treasure, so valuable they were used as money. Historical records describe a single bean buying a ripe avocado, while 100 could purchase a canoe. Warriors on long marches carried pouches of ground cacao mixed with maize, a primitive energy bar that fueled empires. But this was no casual snack. The Aztecs believed cacao was a gift from Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, and its consumption was steeped in ceremony. Priests poured the bitter drink from great heights to create a frothy head, symbolizing the fertile foam from which the earth was born. Conquered tribes paid tribute in sacks of cacao, and merchants transporting it risked raids, making chocolate the ancient equivalent of moving gold bullion through bandit territory. Then came the Europeans, and everything changed. When Cortés brought cacao back to Spain in the 1500s, monks sweetened the bitter brew with cane sugar, creating a version that would conquer palaces far faster than any army. Within a century, chocolate houses in London rivaled coffee shops, while French aristocrats stirred it with milk and served it in porcelain cups. The sacred elixir of Mesoamerica had been reinvented, its spiritual potency diluted, its bitterness tamed, its story rewritten. Yet traces of its origins linger. Modern chefs rediscovering pre-Columbian recipes describe a flavor that's electrifying. The heat of chili amplifying cacao's deep fruitiness, the vanilla adding floral whispers, the absence of sugar forcing the palate to notice nuances lost in modern confections. Even the word chocolate carries echoes of its past, derived from the Aztec xocolatl, meaning bitter water. Today, when you break off a square of dark chocolate with 70% cacao, you're tasting a compromise, a relic of conquest, adaptation, and survival. The Aztecs might not recognize the sweetness, but they'd understand the reverence. After all, some pleasures are so powerful they transcend time and taste like more than just a treat. Byzantine banquets weren't just meals, they were edible theater, where every dish told a story of empire. Picture the great palace of Constantinople's dining hall, its vaulted ceilings shimmering with gold mosaics as servants carried in silver platters stacked with quail stuffed with dates, their skins glazed with pomegranate syrup. At the head table, the emperor might sip wine infused with rose petals and snow. Yes, actual mountain snow transported at great expense to chill his cup, while musicians played lyres tuned to the same scales used in Hagia Sophia's chants. This wasn't gluttony, it was geopolitics on a plate, where the strategic marriage of flavors mirrored Byzantium's role as the hinge between Europe and Asia. What made these feasts extraordinary was their deliberate cosmopolitanism. Take gyros, the Byzantine successor to Roman garum, now blended with Persian saffron and Syrian anise. Or consider sikbaj, a sweet and sour lamb stew borrowed from Baghdad's caliphs but reinvented with Greek honey and Cappadocian wine vinegar. Cookbooks surviving from the era, like the 10th century de Sybaris, read like culinary passports instructions for roasting peacocks to resemble their live plumage, a Roman showstopper, beside recipes for Levantine stuffed grape leaves, a technique borrowed from Arab neighbors. Modern chefs recreating these dishes describe flavors that defy easy categorization. Mastic resin from Chios Island thickening almond milk desserts, while Armenian apricots lent tartness to meat dishes typically associated with medieval Europe. The true genius lay in presentation. Byzantine hosts understood that dining was multisensory theater. Gold leaf dusted onto spiced cakes mirrored the glow of icon lamps, while rosewater sprayed over guests between courses perfumed the air like the empire's famed gardens. Archaeologists analyzing tableware from palace sites found traces of lapis lazuli pigment in serving bowls, evidence that food was sometimes tinted celestial blue, a color reserved for the Virgin Mary's robes in religious art. Even the act of eating followed ritual. Certain dishes could only be touched with spoons of particular materials, pearl handled for aristocrats, carved bone for clergy, turning every bite into a statement of hierarchy. Yet for all its opulence, Byzantine cuisine had a surprising democratic streak. Street vendors in Constantinople sold versions of palace dishes to the masses, albeit without the gold leaf, like kandilakia, fried dough drizzled with thyme honey that evolved into modern laukumades. Sailors on imperial ships subsisted on paximadia, twice-baked barley biscuits that could last for months, a recipe so practical it's still used by Greek shepherds today. This duality, extravagance and endurance, captures Byzantium's essence. Their banquets fed both body and soul, blending the sacred and the sensual in ways that still resonate. When a pastry chef today layers phyllo dough with walnuts and cinnamon, they're recreating a Byzantine dessert called plakos, a proof that the empire's true legacy isn't just in its mosaics or manuscripts, but in flavors that refuse to fade with time. The image of Vikings gorging on roasted boar and swilling mead from horns isn't wrong. It's just wildly incomplete. Peel back the layers of their diet, and you'll find a culinary sophistication that would impress any modern nutritionist. Take that iconic salted cod hanging in smoky Viking longhouses. Far from a simple preservation trick, it was part of an intricate system that turned Scandinavia's short growing seasons into year-round sustenance. Archaeologists sifting through Midden's ancient garbage piles have uncovered evidence of fermented fish sauces, dried reindeer meat, and even barley porridge enriched with crushed linseed, a powerhouse of omega-3s. These weren't just meals, they were calculated survival strategies, honed over generations to thrive in a landscape where winter could last half the year. But here's what shatters the stereotype. Viking settlements from Newfoundland to Kiev reveal traces of foods we rarely associate with raiders. Berry seeds preserved in boggy soil tell us they harvested cloudberries and lingonberries, rich in vitamin C to prevent scurvy during long sea voyages. Shellfish remains found near coastal farms suggest they understood tidal cycles, harvesting mussels and oysters when the moon pulled the waters low. Even their bread defied expectations. Carbonized loaves from Denmark show they mixed barley with ground birch bark, a technique that added sweetness and extended shelf life. Clearly, these were people who viewed their environment as a pantry, not just a battlefield. Perhaps most surprising are the spices. Excavations at Viking Age Birka in Sweden turned up peppercorns from India and cumin seeds likely traded via Byzantine routes, proof that their famed longships carried more than weapons. These exotic flavors didn't just season stews, they signaled status. A chieftain serving pepper-laced venison was flexing his trade connections as boldly as his gold arm rings. Modern experiments recreating Viking-era dishes reveal a palate that balanced preservation with pleasure. Fermented whey added tang to cheese, while honey from local bees sweetened everything from mead to preserved fruits. What emerges isn't the caricature of mindless gluttons, but a culture that treated food as both science and art. Their drying racks and fermentation pits were laboratories where trial and error yielded innovations like skyer, a yogurt-like cheese still popular in Iceland today. Even their infamous mead had purpose beyond revelry. Its antibacterial properties made it safer to drink than stagnant water. The next time you picture a Viking feast, imagine not just roaring warriors, but families passing bowls of barley stew studded with dried apples, or sailors chewing on vitamin-packed seaweed strips during Atlantic crossings. Their diet wasn't just about surviving the Dark Ages, it was about mastering them. In the gilded halls of ancient Persia's royal kitchens, flavor was more than taste, it was a delicate equation, a dance of elements designed to delight both the palate and the soul. Picture a single dish of fesenjan, where tart pomegranate molasses swirls with ground walnuts and tender duck, each spoonful balancing sweet against sour, richness against brightness. This wasn't just cooking, it was alchemy, a philosophy that elevated meals into multisensory experiences. Persian chefs didn't simply feed their kings, they composed edible poetry, where saffron's golden hue symbolized the sun's radiance and rosewater's fragrance echoed the gardens of Shiraz. What set Persian cuisine apart was its obsession with harmony. Texts from the Sasanian era describe feasts where no single flavor dominated. Sour cherries cut through the fattiness of lamb in albolu polo, while fresh herbs like mint and tarragon breathed lightness into slow-cooked stews. Even the humblest ingredients were transformed. Rice, steamed with butter and saffron until each grain stood apart, became chilo, a dish so revered it was said to reflect the order of the cosmos. Modern chefs recreating these recipes note the precision. The way a pinch of dried lime could lift a dish from earthy to ethereal, or how barberries, fried crisp with a touch of sugar, added bursts of tang to balance creamy yogurt dips. But the true genius lay in presentation. Persian banquets were theatrical affairs, with dishes arranged to mimic gardens, herbs strewn like greenery, skewered kebabs standing like trees, jeweled rice shimmering with barberries and pistachios like flowers in bloom. Servants carried silver platters stacked with shirin polo, rice studded with candied orange peel and slivered almonds, a dish meant to celebrate weddings and coronations alike. Archaeologists examining remnants of royal tableware have found traces of turmeric and cinnamon in the glaze, suggesting even the plates were designed to complement the food's palate. The legacy of this culinary philosophy stretches far beyond Persia's borders. Today's Middle Eastern meze platters, with their interplay of creamy hummus, sharp pickles, and smoky grilled meats, owe their balance to Persian principles. The Ottoman Empire's lavish spreads, featuring stuffed eggplants and rose-scented desserts, borrowed heavily from Persian techniques. Even the Indian biryani, layered with fragrant spices and caramelized onions, traces its ancestry to Persian polo dishes brought by Mughal emperors. Yet some secrets remain tantalizingly out of reach. Ancient recipes mention sikbaj, a vinegar-based meat stew sweetened with fruit, now lost to time. Others describe a saffron-infused ice chilled with underground aqueducts, a dessert so luxurious it vanished when the ice houses melted. but in the bustling kitchens of Tehran or the aromatic stalls of Istanbul's Grand Bazaar, you can still taste echoes of Persia's golden age. Every time someone sprinkles sumac on a kebab or stirs pomegranate into a sauce, they're honoring a tradition that turned cooking into an art of subtlety, one where every flavor has a counterpoint, and every meal is a chance to create harmony. Buried beneath the dry soil of Mohenjo-Daro, tiny seeds tell a story of abundance we can barely imagine today. Archaeologists sifting through the ruins of this ancient Indus Valley city have found traces of fruits that once flourished here. Plump jujubes drying in the sun, fragrant melons split open to reveal ruby red flesh, and clusters of grapes so sweet they were likely dried into raisins for trade. These weren't just snacks, they were the lifeblood of a civilization that thrived 4,000 years ago, a testament to how carefully the Harappans coaxed flavor from a landscape that's now largely desert. What's remarkable isn't just what they grew, but how they grew it. The Indus Valley people were master hydraulic engineers, channeling monsoon floods into intricate irrigation systems that turned arid plains into orchards. Carbonized remains reveal they cultivated at least 6 varieties of melons, each adapted to different microclimates, some for water storage during droughts, others prized for their sugary flesh. Jujube trees, now a rare sight in the region, were so central to their diet that the fruit's pits appear in kitchen waste across multiple excavation sites, suggesting they were eaten fresh, dried, or even fermented into early wines. But climate wasn't the only force shaping their harvests. Trade routes stretched from the Himalayas to Mesopotamia, carrying not just goods but ideas. Grape seeds found in Harappan layers match varieties grown in Balochistan, proof that farmers exchanged cuttings to improve their crops. Meanwhile, Mesopotamian tablets mention Meluha, likely the Indus Valley exporting exotic fruits, hinting at a demand that may have driven local cultivation. This was globalization in its infancy, a network where flavors traveled as fast as boats could sail. Then, around 1900 BCE, something shifted. Pollen samples from ancient lake beds show declining tree cover, while sediment layers reveal increasingly erratic monsoons. The very crops that had sustained the Harappans, like drought-resistant jujubes, suddenly weren't enough. As cities were abandoned, orchards withered, and knowledge of these fruits faded into obscurity. Today, a few hardy jujube trees still grow near crumbling Harappan wells, their gnarled branches a living link to a lost culinary world. Yet there's hope in these forgotten flavors. Modern farmers in Pakistan's Sindh province are reviving indigenous melon varieties, using seeds preserved in ancient storage jars. Chefs from Delhi to Dubai are rediscovering jujubes, roasting them with spices to echo Harappan recipes. And in labs, scientists study these resilient fruits for clues to drought-proofing our future food supply. The Indus Valley's bounty may have vanished once, but its legacy is ripe for rediscovery, a reminder that every seed holds not just a taste, but a story waiting to be told. To the Maya, maize wasn't just a crop, it was the very substance of life itself, woven into their creation myths, their daily meals, and their most sacred rituals. Picture a farmer in ancient Tikal kneeling in a milpa, a carefully tended field where maize grew alongside beans and squash, their leaves intertwining like old friends. This wasn't just agriculture, it was a divine partnership, a reflection of the Maya's belief that humans were literally molded from maize dough by the gods. Modern geneticists studying ancient cobs have traced this bond back over 9,000 years, to the first wild grasses painstakingly bred into plump, nutritious kernels in Mesoamerica's humid lowlands. But for the Maya, maize was more than a scientific achievement. It was a living bridge between earth and sky, between mortals and the gods who sustained them. What's astonishing is how deeply maize shaped every aspect of Mayan life, from the tortilla as patted out by women at dawn to the frothy ceremonial drink called atole, sweetened with honey and spiced with chili. Maize was the thread stitching together meals and milestones. Archaeologists analyzing pottery residue have found traces of maize in vessels used for both feasts and funerals, proving its role as food for the living and offerings for the dead. Even their calendars synchronized planting and harvest with celestial events, ensuring the crop cycles mirrored the movements of the cosmos. Modern recreations of these ancient maize dishes reveal a surprising sophistication. Nixtamalization, the process of soaking kernels in lime water, unlocked essential nutrients while giving tortilla as their distinctive aroma, a technique still used today. But maize's legacy goes beyond nutrition. The Popol Vuh, the Maya's sacred text, tells how the gods experimented with wood and clay before crafting humans from maize, symbolizing their ideal balance of strength and spirit. Temples were adorned with maize motifs, and rulers wore headdresses sprouting golden cobs, embodying their role as intermediaries between the people and the divine. When drought struck, a fate that may have contributed to the Maya's decline, it wasn't just a crop failure, it was a spiritual crisis, a rupture in the covenant between heaven and earth. Today, scientists are uncovering new layers to this story. DNA analysis of ancient maize shows how Mayan farmers selectively bred varieties resistant to drought or pests, creating a biodiversity that modern industrial farming has since eroded. In remote Yucatan villages, descendants of the Maya still grind maize on stone metates, preserving flavors that once nourished kings. And when a chef in Mexico City slow roasts heirloom maize for contemporary tacos, they're honoring a tradition that turned a humble grass into the heartbeat of a civilization, one kernel at a time. Medieval Arab kitchens were laboratories of flavor where science and poetry simmered side by side. Take the 13th century cookbook, Kitab al-Tabik. Its pages don't just list ingredients, they prescribe exact temperatures for caramelizing sugar and specify which rose varieties yield the most fragrant syrup. This wasn't mere cooking, it was high art where a dish of lamb stewed with apricots and cinnamon wasn't just dinner but a calculated balance of humoral theory, believed to cool the body in scorching desert climates. Modern chefs recreating these recipes are stunned by their precision, like mamunia, a rice pudding gilded with saffron and pistachios, its texture achieved by slowly evaporating milk in a copper pan to prevent scorching, a technique still used in French pastry kitchens today. The brilliance of these texts lies in their dual purpose. While detailing how to layer spices in a meat pie, they might also explain how cardamom aids digestion or why sumac's tartness counteracts fatty meats. Baghdad's physicians and cooks collaborated closely, resulting in dishes like sikbaj, a vinegar-based fish stew sweetened with dates that doubled as a remedy for melancholy. Recent analysis of cookware from Islamic Spain reveals residues of cumin and coriander in medicinal concentrations, proof that every meal was an edible pharmacy. But these flavors didn't stay confined to palace kitchens. Along the Silk Road and across the Mediterranean, Arab culinary ideas traveled faster than caravans could walk. When crusaders tasted sugar-sweetened almond milk in the Levant, they carried the concept back to Europe, where it evolved into marzipan. Persian rice techniques met Arab spice blends in Andalusia, birthing Spain's iconic paella. Even the humble apricot, native to China, became a staple of Middle Eastern cooking after Arab agronomists perfected its cultivation, then spread it westward, transforming French jam and Venetian pastries along the way. The real surprise, some of these medieval dishes never left. In the backstreets of Fez, vendors still sell emsemen, layered flatbreads identical to those described in 14th century texts. while Damascus confectioners craft rosewater nougat using molds unchanged since the Umayyad era. These edible heirlooms remind us that the Arab world's greatest culinary gift wasn't just recipes, it was a philosophy where nourishment and knowledge were inseparable, and every bite carried the legacy of 1,000 conversations between cooks, healers, and explorers. The Silk Road's caravans carried more than just silks and spices. They were mobile gardens, smuggling seeds and flavors that would rewrite the culinary maps of entire continents. Take the humble carrot, for example. Originally a scrawny purple root grown in Afghanistan, it traveled westward along those dusty trade routes, transforming under selective cultivation into the plump orange vegetable we know today. Medieval European farmers initially dismissed it as livestock feed until Arab traders demonstrated its sweetness when roasted with honey and cumin, a revelation that turned carrots from fodder to delicacy. Now imagine Italian tomato sauce without carrot's subtle sweetness, or French mayap while missing its earthy backbone, and you begin to grasp how deeply these quiet migrations shaped our plates. Eggplants tell an even wilder tale. Native to India, these glossy purple fruits were viewed with outright suspicion when they first reached the Mediterranean. Ancient Greek texts called them mad apples, warning they caused insanity if eaten raw, a myth likely born from their bitter, unripe flesh. But Persian cooks saw potential, perfecting techniques to leach out bitterness with salt and transforming them into creamy dips and rich stews. By the time eggplants reached Renaissance Italy, they'd shed their dangerous reputation, starring in dishes like melanzane alla parmigiana. Today, it's impossible to imagine Middle Eastern baba ganoush or Sichuanese fish fragrant eggplant without this globe-trotting vegetable's journey. Citrus fruits, though, faced the opposite problem. They were too coveted. When lemons and bitter oranges arrived in Europe via Arab-controlled Sicily, their rarity made them status symbols rather than food. Medieval nobles displayed them as exotic curios, while their juice became a luxury ingredient for wealthy kitchens. Only when Spanish explorers planted orange groves in the New World did these fruits democratize, eventually becoming breakfast staples. Yet their impact was immediate. Citrus juices revolutionized preservation and flavor balancing, giving us everything from Venetian ceviche to Moroccan preserved lemons. What's fascinating isn't just the distance these ingredients traveled, but the resistance they overcame. Carrots had to prove their worth, eggplants needed cultural rehab, and citrus fruits had to fall from aristocratic grace to become everyday joys. Each adoption required curiosity, adaptation, and sometimes sheer stubbornness, like the Ottoman gardeners who crossbred tart cherries with sweet varieties to create the perfect balance for meat dishes. These weren't just botanical exchanges, they were acts of culinary diplomacy where unfamiliar flavors slowly won hearts through persistence and reinvention. Now consider how empty our pantries would be without these immigrants. No carrots in Thai curries, no eggplants in Greek moussaka, no lemons in British gin and tonics. The Silk Road didn't just connect East and West, it remixed them, creating flavors so foundational, we've forgotten they were ever foreign. So the next time you grate carrots into a salad or savor a slice of lemon pie, remember, you're tasting the legacy of ancient traders who bet on a seed's potential and won. Ancient fermentation wasn't just a way to preserve food, it was a quiet revolution, a microscopic alchemy that transformed ordinary ingredients into something extraordinary across cultures separated by oceans and centuries. Picture a Korean farmer in the 1st century BCE, burying clay jars of noppa cabbage layered with chili and shrimp paste deep in the earth, where winter's chill would slow the fermentation just enough to create kimchi's signature tang. Now fast forward to a Roman fishing village, where workers stirred massive vats of fish guts and salt under the Mediterranean sun, waiting months for the mixture to liquefy into garum, the umami-rich sauce that would flavor everything from roasted meats to fruit desserts. These techniques might seem worlds apart, but they share a profound truth. Humans didn't invent fermentation, we discovered it, then spent millennia perfecting its magic. What's striking is how these ancient methods mirrored each other despite the distance. Both kimchi and garum relied on salt to suppress harmful bacteria while allowing beneficial microbes to thrive. Both required precise environmental control. Kimchi needed cool underground temperatures for gradual fermentation, while garum demanded the consistent warmth of coastal climates. And both became cultural cornerstones. Korean texts from the 12th century describe kimchi as essential for surviving harsh winters, while Roman writers like Pliny the Elder marveled at garum's ability to elevate even the simplest dish. Modern scientists analyzing residue from ancient fermentation vessels have found strains of lactic acid bacteria in kimchi, nearly identical to those used today, and garum's glutamate levels rivaling modern soy sauce, proof that these weren't accidental discoveries but mastered technologies. Yet the revival of these ancient ferments tells an even richer story. In Seoul, chefs are now experimenting with 1,000-year-old kimchi recipes, aging batches in traditional ongi pots to achieve flavors commercial production can't replicate. Meanwhile, Italian chefs like Massimo Bottura have reintroduced garum to haute cuisine, using it to deepen the flavor of risottos and even desserts, the irony. Today's food scientists praise these age-old techniques for their probiotic benefits and sustainability. Kimchi's live cultures support gut health, while garum's fish fermentation reduces waste by using every part of the catch. Ancient cooks couldn't have known about lactobacillus or umami, but their intuition created foods perfectly suited to both body and palate. Perhaps the most fascinating twist lies in the accidents. When archaeologists uncovered a 2,000-year-old kimchi jar in Korea, they found traces of seafood that predated written recipes, suggesting early versions might have been closer to Southeast Asian fish sources than today's chili-laden versions. Similarly, a shipwreck off the coast of Italy yielded sealed garum amphorae whose contents, when analyzed, contained unexpected spices like coriander, hinting at regional variations lost to time. These discoveries remind us that fermentation was never static. It evolved with trade, climate, and taste, just as it does now in hipster fermentation labs and Michelin-starred kitchens. The real lesson: every time you bite into a tangy pickle or drizzle fish sauce on a stir-fry, you're participating in a tradition that spans millennia and continents, a testament to humanity's shared instinct to harness the invisible world of microbes for flavor, survival, and joy. From the clay pots of ancient Korea to the stainless steel vats of modern craft producers, fermentation remains our oldest and perhaps most delicious form of collaboration with nature. The story of ancient superfoods reads like a culinary whodunit, nutrient-dense powerhouses that once fueled empires, mysteriously vanishing from tables for centuries before staging dramatic comebacks. Take spelt, the rugged wheat cousin that built Roman legions, hardy enough to grow in poor soil and packed with more protein than modern wheat. It was the grain that conquered Europe. Yet by the Middle Ages, farmers began abandoning it for higher-yielding wheat varieties, prioritizing quantity over nutrition. Fast forward to modern gluten-sensitive diners rediscovering spelt's digestibility, and suddenly this ancient grain is sprouting up in artisanal bakeries from Berlin to Portland. Quinoa's tale is even more improbable. For 3,000 years, Andean farmers cultivated this protein-packed seed, revering it as chusaya mama, or mother grain. Then Spanish colonizers banned its cultivation, dismissing it as peasant food and forcing farmers to grow European wheat instead. Quinoa nearly vanished until the 1970s, when NASA scientists flagged it as the perfect space crop for its complete amino acid profile. Today, it's a global health craze, though ironically, its popularity briefly made it too expensive for the Bolivian farmers who kept its traditions alive. But why do superfoods disappear in the first place? Sometimes conquest rewrites menus, like when the Spanish replaced amaranth, the Aztec sacred grain, with European cereals, burning fields to erase its cultural significance. Other times, agricultural industrialization sidelines nutritious but low-yield crops. Ethiopia's iron-rich ancient grain was nearly eclipsed by commercial wheat before marathon runners touted its energy-boosting powers. Even simple vanity plays a role. Purple carrots packed with anthocyanins were bred orange by Dutch growers to honor their royal family, sacrificing nutrition for aesthetics. The revival of these foods today isn't just nostalgia, it's necessity. Modern science confirms what ancient cultures knew instinctively. Emmer wheat's high fiber protects against diabetes, while fonio, a drought-resistant West African grain, offers critical nutrition in climate-vulnerable regions. Farmers from Italy to India are now resurrecting lost crops, not as museum pieces, but as solutions. Spelt's deep roots prevent soil erosion, and millet's minimal water needs make it a climate change warrior. Perhaps the most poetic twist lies in how these comebacks bridge past and future. When an Appalachian farmer plants Cherokee Trail of Tears beans, a variety carried by Native Americans during forced relocation, they're not just growing heirloom produce, they're cultivating resilience. And when a Tokyo chef serves millet sushi, it's more than a trendy dish, it's a testament to humanity's endless cycle of losing, rediscovering, and reinventing the foods that make us stronger. The next superfood revolution might not come from a lab, but from the seeds our ancestors left behind. At Versailles, the scent of roasting songbirds and caramelizing sugar wasn't just dinner, it was a calculated display of dominance. Louis Roman XIV kitchens sprawled across multiple buildings, with specialized rooms for pastry, confectionery, and even a dedicated office for brewing his morning chocolate. This wasn't just culinary excess, it was political theater. Every truffle-stuffed pheasant served in the Hall of Mirrors sent a message. France's wealth was so vast, it could literally be eaten. Across the globe, China's Qing dynasty emperors orchestrated equally elaborate edible spectacles. The Forbidden City's kitchens employed thousands, with separate departments for Manchu and Han banquets, each dish a careful negotiation of ethnic power dynamics. A single imperial meal might feature 80 courses, from swallow's nest soup to lion-shaped dumplings, their artistry reinforcing the emperor's mandate from heaven. What's startling is how tightly these kitchens guarded their secrets. Versailles' pastry chefs swore oaths never to reveal recipes for signature delicacies like pain à la duchesse, a brioche so rich its dough contained entire egg yolks by the dozen. In Istanbul, Topkapi Palace's confectioners worked behind locked doors, their techniques for folding honey into baklava considered state secrets on par with military strategies. Even ingredient sourcing became espionage. Ottoman sultans maintained private spice caravans to bypass Venetian merchants, while Versailles stewards bribed fishermen to keep the best lobster catches from rival nobles' tables. Yet these kitchens were also unexpected engines of innovation. When Ming Dynasty chefs created beggar's chicken, a dish wrapped in lotus leaves and clay, then pit roasted, they weren't just showing off. The method preserved moisture without expensive fuel, a technique later adapted by European armies. France's obsession with perfecting champagne wasn't just about luxury. The pressurized bottles required breakthroughs in glassmaking that revolutionized food storage. Even the humble ice cream served in Mughal India's royal courts spurred advances in salt and ice refrigeration, a technology that would eventually democratize frozen treats worldwide. The darker side of this culinary power plays waste on an unimaginable scale. Records from Vienna's Hofburg Palace describe entire stag carcasses discarded after a single banquet, while Edo Castle's kitchens routinely threw out enough rice to feed villagers. But here's the twist: some royal leftovers became power tools themselves. Versailles' grand couvert tradition, where the king dined publicly, allowed favored courtiers to take untouched dishes, turning food into a currency of favor. In Korea, Joseon dynasty kings redistributed banquet leftovers to scholars and officials, reinforcing Confucian ideals of paternalistic rule. Today, we still taste these royal legacies in surprising ways. That layered croissant you enjoy, it evolved from Marie Antoinette's Viennese bakers. The intricate sugar flowers atop wedding cakes, direct descendants of Tudor-era subtleties, edible sculptures designed to awe dinner guests. Even the concept of a tasting menu mirrors the progression of imperial Chinese banquets, where dishes were carefully sequenced to showcase the court's sophistication. These kitchens didn't just feed monarchs, they shaped how the world eats, one guarded recipe at a time. Recreating a 2,000-year-old recipe isn't as simple as following faded instructions. It's more like solving a culinary crime scene with missing evidence. Take silphium, that legendary Roman herb loved to extinction. Modern chefs attempting to replicate its flavor have to play detective, testing everything from asafoetida to wild fennel pollen, hoping to catch a ghost of its elusive taste. Meanwhile, chemists analyze residues clinging to ancient cookware, identifying compounds like methyl salicylate, a compound found in wintergreen in Viking drinking horns, hinting at fermented berry brews spiked with aromatic herbs. This marriage of labs and ladles reveals how much we've lost and how much we can still recover. One of the biggest hurdles: ancient recipes weren't written for modern kitchens. A Babylonian cuneiform tablet might list ingredients like handfuls of barley or water until the gods are pleased, leaving chefs guessing at measurements. When a team at Yale reinterpreted a 4,000-year-old Mesopotamian stew, they discovered the original recipe was more poetic than precise. Meat of the young lamb, like the dew of dawn, must mingle with milk and onions. Translating that into a test kitchen required trial, error, and a willingness to embrace ambiguity, like realizing dew of dawn likely meant tender spring lamb, not literal moisture. Then there's the ingredient problem. Many staples of ancient pantries, like Rome's favorite fish sauce garum or the Inca's freeze-dried potatoes, don't have perfect modern equivalents. When Copenhagen's Nordic Food Lab tried reviving Viking-era fermented skate, they hit a snag. Today's oceans are more polluted, altering the bacteria crucial for safe fermentation. Their solution: partnering with marine biologists to source cleaner waters and tweak the process, proving that culinary archaeology sometimes needs environmental science as a sidekick. Technology offers surprising shortcuts. Spectrometers can detect trace elements of spices in millennia-old cooking pots, while 3D printers recreate broken ceramic vessels to test ancient cooking methods. At Boston University, food historians used CT scans on Egyptian mummies to analyze gut contents, revealing unexpected ingredients like dried figs and fenugreek in their last meals. These tools don't just fill gaps, they challenge assumptions. For years, scholars thought medieval European beer was uniformly bitter until residue studies proved some batches were sweetened with honey and mugwort, a revelation that's inspired craft brewers to experiment with historical recipes. Yet some mysteries resist even high-tech solutions. The exact blend of herbs in Charlemagne's favorite roast remains debated, and the floral notes in Cleopatra's perfumed wines are still theoretical. But that's part of the thrill. Every approximation brings us closer to tasting history as it was, not as we imagine it. When a chef in Istanbul simmers a Byzantine lamb stew based on pollen traces found in a monastery's kitchen, or a food scientist in Oaxaca grinds heirloom maize for tortilla as using pre-Columbian tools, they're not just cooking. They're resurrecting flavors that once defined empires, one imperfect but delicious bite at a time. In the hushed temples of Tenochtitlan, priests held ears of maize aloft like sacred torches, their golden kernels glinting in the firelight as offerings to Chiquimacotl, the Aztec goddess of sustenance. This wasn't just a meal, it was a living prayer, a covenant between earth and sky. Across oceans and eras, food became the universal language of reverence, transforming humble ingredients into vessels for the divine. The Greeks poured wine onto the earth as libations, believing its crimson streams connected them to the underworld gods. In ancient India, ghee-soaked grains crackled in sacrificial fires, their smoky tendrils carrying petitions to the heavens. Every culture, it seems, discovered the same profound truth. What nourishes the body could also nourish the soul. Consider the ritual of the Jewish Passover Seder, where bitter herbs and unleavened bread aren't just eaten but interrogated, each bite a tactile lesson in oppression and liberation. Or the Tibetan tradition of sculpting intricate butter lambs for Lunar New Year, their fleeting beauty a meditation on impermanence. These practices reveal how food transcends sustenance. It becomes a script for storytelling, a map for morality, a way to chew on the big questions. Archaeologists digging at Çatalhöyük, a 9,000-year-old settlement in Turkey, found bins of stored grain beneath plaster shrines, suggesting even Neolithic peoples linked harvests to holiness. Some rituals were visceral, even shocking to modern sensibilities. The Aztecs shaped dough into god figures with amaranth and honey, then sacrificed them by eating the effigies, a communion centuries before Christianity's Eucharist. In ancient Hawaii, priests offered the first fruits of the season to Lono, the god of fertility, by arranging them on towering wooden altars. Failure to observe these rites wasn't just disrespectful, it was dangerous. The Maya believed neglected maize deities would retaliate with famine, while Roman augurs read the entrails of sacrificed animals like divine text messages, their splattered patterns dictating when to plant or go to war. Yet not all sacred foods demanded solemnity. The Dionysian mysteries of Greece turned wine into a conduit for ecstatic revelry, worshippers dancing with vine-wrapped Theseus staffs as they channeled the gods' chaotic energy. In Japan, sake barrels stacked at Shinto shrines symbolize joyous abundance, their contents shared in festivals where the sacred and the celebratory blur. Even the act of sharing food could be sacramental. The Sioux tribes' Wapilla feasts expressed gratitude by feeding the entire community, reinforcing bonds between people and the land that sustained them. Today, we've secularized many of these traditions without losing their essence. Birthday cakes crowned with candles echo ancient fire rituals. Thanksgiving torrents carry whispers of harvest offerings. And when a chef plates a dish with deliberate artistry, they're participating in an ages-old tradition, elevating food beyond fuel into something that stirs the spirit. The next time you raise a glass in toast or break bread with loved ones, remember, you're part of a lineage that has always known meals can be miracles in disguise. The humble clay pot might seem like a simple kitchen tool, but in the hands of ancient cooks, it became a revolutionary technology that transformed how humanity ate. Picture a Neolithic woman in Mesopotamia, shaping wet clay between her palms to form a vessel sturdy enough to simmer grains over a fire, an innovation that allowed for softer, more digestible meals than ever before. Archaeologists studying these early pots have found telltale scorch marks and residue patterns that reveal their multi-purpose use: boiling millet in China, stewing lentils along the Indus River, even fermenting fish sauces in Roman coastal towns. What's remarkable isn't just their ubiquity, but their adaptability. The same basic design could bake bread when inverted over coals, steam vegetables with hot stones inside, or preserve olives under layers of brine. These unassuming containers were the original slow cookers, pressure cookers, and storage jars all in one, extending the shelf life of perishables and unlocking nutrients through techniques like nixtamalization, where maize soaked in alkaline solutions became more nutritious. Grinding stones tell an even deeper story. Found from Aboriginal Australian sites to Mayan ruins, these worn slabs of basalt or granite weren't just food processors, they were cultural keystones. The rhythmic scraping of grain against stone was often a communal activity, with women gathering to transform hard seeds into flour while sharing stories and songs. Analysis of microscopic wear patterns on Egyptian grinding stones shows some were used exclusively for sacred grains destined for temple offerings, while others bore the oily residues of nuts pressed into early butters. In Mexico's Tehuacan Valley, archaeologists discovered manos and metates so finely polished from centuries of grinding maize. Their surfaces still gleam under museum lights, a testament to generations of hands that shaped both the tools and the diets they enabled. Then there's the bronze knife, a luxury that reshaped culinary finesse. Before its invention, meat was often hacked apart with stone blades or torn by hand, but bronze's sharp edge allowed for precise butchery. Think of the difference between ripping bread and slicing it. A Shang dynasty kitchen knife excavated near the Yellow River still bears nicks from deboning fish, while Viking-era blades found in Denmark show where patterns suggesting they trimmed herbs as delicately as they filleted salmon. These tools didn't just change how food was prepared, they influenced what was considered edible. The ability to thinly slice tough root vegetables or julienne fibrous greens likely expanded ancient menus in ways we're only beginning to understand. Perhaps most fascinating are the tools that didn't survive: the wooden spoons that rotted away, the woven baskets used for steaming that left only faint impressions in the dirt. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, archaeologists found plaster casts of vessels made from organic materials, their forms preserved like shadows in the hardened earth. These ghost tools remind us that the archaeological record is biased toward what endures, skewing our view of ancient kitchens toward stone and metal over more ephemeral innovations. Yet some ancient tools never went out of style. The Japanese suribachi mortar, with its ridged interior perfect for grinding sesame into fragrant paste, is virtually unchanged from Jomon period prototypes. Indian silbat, a grinding stone, still crush spices with a texture no electric blender can replicate. And in Ethiopia, the mitad clay griddle continues to bake injera with the same porous perfection it did 2,000 years ago. These survivors aren't relics, they're proof that when a tool perfectly solves a culinary challenge, its design becomes timeless. Every time a modern cook reaches for a stone mortar or cast iron skillet, they're touching a chain of innovation that stretches back to the first hands that shaped earth and ore into edible alchemy. Long before oil or gold dominated global markets, the fate of empires often hinged on something far more perishable: flavor. Take silphium, that legendary Roman herb so coveted. Its image was stamped onto coins like a botanical celebrity. Grown only in a narrow strip of North African coastline, this pungent plant seasoned everything from lamb stews to love potions until demand literally harvested it into extinction. But its disappearance wasn't just an ecological tragedy, it was an economic earthquake. When the last silphium stalk was reportedly gifted to Emperor Nero, traders who'd built fortunes shipping it from Cyrene faced ruin overnight, and Rome's spice markets scrambled to replace it with inferior substitutes like asafoetida. This wasn't mere culinary inconvenience. It reshaped trade routes, toppled merchant dynasties, and left historians wondering if the herb's mythical contraceptive properties might have altered population trends had it survived. Half a world away, another plant was stirring even bloodier conflicts. Chinese rhubarb, prized in medieval Europe for its medicinal roots, became such a geopolitical pawn. The British East India Company once threatened war with Russia over access to Tibetan rhubarb fields. Why such frenzy over a bitter stalk? European physicians believed its purgative powers could cure everything from plague to melancholy, creating demand so insatiable, Catherine the Great declared it a state monopoly. Caravans smuggled dried rhubarb through mountain passes where bandits lurked, knowing a single sack could fetch a nobleman's ransom. The irony, while Europeans overdosed on rhubarb tonic, Chinese herbalists used it sparingly, amused by foreigners' obsession with what they considered a humble digestive aid. Spices didn't just flavor food, they bankrolled empires and sparked wars. When Portuguese navigators breached the Indian Ocean in the 1500s, they weren't seeking territory so much as control over the cinnamon and clove trade. Their brutal occupation of Goa and Malacca wasn't about conquest for land, but domination of the spice choke points where winds and currents forced ships to cluster. Venice, grown fat on its monopoly of Eastern spices via Arab middlemen, watched in horror as Lisbon's direct access to the source collapsed prices. The resulting economic panic was so severe, Venetian merchants reportedly burned spice stockpiles to artificially inflate scarcity, an early example of market manipulation worthy of Wall Street. Even sugar had its dark side of exploitation. The same Caribbean plantations that sweetened Europe's tea fueled the transatlantic slave trade, turning human lives into a commodity measured against sacks of crystalline sweetness. Napoleon's obsession with sugar beets wasn't culinary preference, it was wartime strategy. When Britain blockaded French ports, cutting off cane sugar imports, the emperor offered a fortune to anyone who could extract sugar from humble beets, kickstarting an industry that would eventually democratize sweetness. The lesson: when taste drives profit, it rewrites maps and topples regimes. From the pepper wars of antiquity to modern quinoa disputes pitting Bolivian farmers against multinational corporations, food has always been more than sustenance, its power distilled into edible form. The next time you sprinkle cinnamon on your oatmeal, remember, empires rose and fell trying to control that very pinch. In a sleek Tokyo kitchen, Chef Hisato Nakahira bends over a bubbling pot of something that looks ancient and futuristic at once, a broth based on 8th century Japanese court cuisine, infused with foraged mountain herbs and thickened with powdered acorns, just as his ancestors might have prepared. But there's a twist. He serves it with a foam of modern molecular gastronomy, creating a dish that bridges 1,200 years in a single bite. Nakahira is part of a growing movement of chefs who aren't just studying history, they're resurrecting it, one reinterpreted recipe at a time. From Copenhagen to Osaka, culinary innovators are scouring faded manuscripts, carbonized kitchen scraps, and even the tooth enamel of long-dead diners to reconstruct flavors once thought lost forever. Take Daniel Soto, a Mexico City chef who spent years deciphering Aztec glyphs to recreate the exact maize varieties used in Moctezuma's court. His tortillas, ground on volcanic stone metates and nixtamalized with wood ash instead of lime, have a smoky depth that industrial masa can't match. Then there's Istanbul's Semsa Denizsul, who reverse-engineered a Byzantine seafood stew by analyzing residue in a clay pot from a shipwreck, adjusting the recipe when lab tests revealed traces of an extinct Mediterranean oyster. These aren't gimmicks, they're edible time travel, blending archaeological rigor with culinary artistry. What's surprising is how these ancient meats' modern dishes resonate with today's diners. At London's Apicius, a restaurant named after Rome's first known cookbook, patrons clamor for garum glazed venison, despite the fish sauce's funky aroma. People think they want familiarity, says Chef Clarissa Y, but there's a thrill in tasting something that feels both alien and ancestral. Her version of Tang Dynasty, Lion's Head, meatballs traditionally made with minced wolf meat, substitutes ethical bison, but keeps the period-accurate spice blend of Sichuan pepper and fermented black beans, creating a flavor that's somehow nostalgic even for first-time tasters. The challenges are immense. When New York's Elijah Holland attempts Neolithic recipes, he faces ingredient extinction, like the European aurochs, a wild ancestor of cattle whose rich, gamey meat-flavored Stone Age stews. His solution, DNA analysis of bone fragments to identify modern breeds with similar fat composition, leading him to rare Hungarian grey cattle. Other chefs collaborate with scientists. Copenhagen's Rocio Sanche partners with microbiologists to culture Viking-era fermentation bacteria, while Lima's Virgilio Martinez works with botanists to map lost Inca crops still growing in remote Andean valleys. Yet this movement isn't about slavish authenticity. Barcelona's Albert Rorich adds liquid nitrogen to medieval Catalan sauces, arguing that innovation honors tradition when it amplifies rather than obscures the original intent. His deconstructed version of escudella, a meat and vegetable stew once eaten by pilgrims, captures the essence of each component in vivid, separate bites, a commentary on how modern palates crave distinct flavors even as we long for historical connection. Perhaps the most poignant experiments come from conflict zones. In war-torn Aleppo, Chef Mohammed Anwar recreates Umayyad-era lamb dishes using surviving family recipes, offering diners a taste of Syria's unbroken culinary lineage despite contemporary destruction. Similarly, Ukrainian chefs are reviving Kievan Rus porridge recipes as acts of cultural preservation, their steaming bowls standing as edible resistance against erasure. The magic happens when these dishes leap off the plate into broader consciousness. A single TikTok video of a chef preparing Roman Sevillum, a cheesecake with bay leaves, can spark thousands of home cooks seeking heritage. Supermarkets now stock previously obscure grains like fricassee and teff because restaurant menus made them fashionable. And when a 3-star Michelin chef serves Mesopotamian date and cinnamon beer alongside foie gras, it reshapes what we consider gourmet. This isn't just cooking, it's conversation across centuries. Every time a chef cracks open an ancient text or tests a residue sample, they're asking, how did our ancestors find joy in scarcity? What can their ingenuity teach us about sustainability? And perhaps most importantly, what flavors, abandoned along the way, deserve a second chance? The answers are simmering in kitchens worldwide, where the past isn't just preserved, but reimagined with every whisk, roast, and reduction. Rediscovering these lost flavors does more than tantalize our taste buds. It stitches us back into the grand tapestry of human ingenuity. Think about the Mesopotamian brewers who transformed barley into liquid gold, or the Maya who saw divine magic in every kernel of maize. These weren't just recipes, they were acts of resilience, love letters to survival written in steam and spice. Each time we recreate a Viking's fermented fish or sip a Tang Dynasty tea, we're not just tasting history, we're communing with the hands that first shaped these dishes, the minds that turned scarcity into abundance. Food has always been humanity's most intimate time capsule. A Roman garum jar cracked open after 2 millennia still carries the briny scent of the Mediterranean sun, while the charred remains of an Inca potato freeze dried 5 centuries ago whispers secrets of mountain survival. These flavors cross oceans and epochs to remind us how much and how little has changed. The same fermentation techniques that preserved Korean kimchi in royal courts now fill modern probiotic shelves. The Inca's chuño, born of freezing nights and stomping feet, shares DNA with the freeze-dried strawberries in your breakfast cereal. History doesn't just repeat itself, it simmers, reduces, and finds new ways to nourish us. But this journey isn't just about looking backward. As climate change reshapes our food systems, ancient wisdom offers unexpected solutions. Farmers battling drought are rediscovering millet, a grain nurtured by the Harappans 4,000 years ago. Chefs combating food waste study Roman garum factories where every fish scrap was transformed into treasure. Even space agencies eye the Incas' freeze-drying methods for Martian meals. The past isn't a museum, it's a toolbox, brimming with tested ideas waiting for their second act. So what's your culinary time machine? Would you brave a sip of Aztec xocolotl, its chilly heat jolting your senses awake? Or perhaps savor a Byzantine rosewater pudding, each bite perfumed like an imperial garden? Maybe you'd choose the humbler magic of a Neolithic flatbread, its smoky crust telling tales of the world's first ovens. Whatever calls to you, remember, every meal we eat is a conversation across centuries. Hit the comments to share which ancient dish you'd resurrect, and join us next time as we keep peeling back the layers of history, one delicious discovery at a time. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a bite of the past.